Hey, welcome in, folks. As you can see, I have a legitimate microphone now. Unfortunately, it has taken me about 3 hours to figure out how to correctly utilize it, but I digress. I am here to talk some soccer, DFS today. Soccer is finally back. I'm going to be talking about the K-League slate, and look, I get it. The K-League slate is now an afterthought with the announcement of Bundesliga contest. Props to DK for doing that. But I'll tell you what, I think there is still a really big edge to potentially be had on this K-League slate. Number one, because it's now an afterthought, less attention on it. And it's also just extremely difficult to find good information and data on this league. So that is kind of a deterrent for people to do the necessary research. But luckily, I have spent the time and done that research. So I am going to play this 3-game K-League slate, and I will break it down here in this video. There are also a couple of showdown slates as well, so this video will be useful for that. All right, enough of the intro and BS. Let's get into this. It is a 3-game slate with the first match at 1 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. PT. It's between Sangju and Gangwon. Both teams are plus money here, but Gangwon is the favorite. That is the team that I do expect to have more chances in this match. The 3:30 a.m. Eastern Time matches between Daegu and Pohang. This is going to be the closest match, and I think this one could go either way, and that's why we see both of these teams at plus money, relatively in the same neighborhood. Finally, the 6 a.m. Eastern Time game is between Busan and Jeonbuk. This is the biggest mismatch, and I really will be looking to target Jeonbuk here. They're a minus 160 favorite. They're the title holders from last season, while Busan are a newly promoted side. So a pretty big mismatch here, and definitely a game to look at targeting. All right. Now I'm going to go through a couple news and notes on each match, and then also talk about potential targets from each team. And while I do this, I'm going to be referencing the formations from last week. So these are, of course, subject to change, but it's the best we've got here until we can get confirmed lineups. By the way, to confirm lineups, I recommend the OneFootball app. I have it on my phone. This is their website. But about 45 to 50 minutes before kickoff, they will release the starting lineups there, and better yet, they lay out the formation for you. Granted, the formation is not always correct, but it's usually fairly accurate and better than just seeing a list of names, of course. All right. So first match, let's start with Gangwon. Gangwon won their first match last week, 3-1. They held about 70% possession. Their style has been compared to Barcelona, obviously not talent-wise, but they like to hold on to the ball, a lot of short passes, movement off the ball to create chances. So that's their style. The reason that's mainly important is because when they hold that much possession, they're going to limit their opponents. So I don't like the fantasy prospects of their opponent, Sangmu or Sangju, here all that much, because I don't know that they're going to have enough of the ball. So just something to keep in mind. As far as targets from Gangwon, the number one guy I'm looking at here is Youngjae Lee. He's priced up pretty high at 10,300 on the 3-game slate. He was their set piece taker, corners and free kicks in the first game, and I expect that to continue. He led the team in crosses with 7 and shots with 2. He's also scored no less than 8.5 DraftKings points in 11 straight matches. So he's got a really consistent floor, which you do need at that price. The other guy I'm looking at from Gangwon is the central forward here, Song Dae Kim. He's only 4,600. He also led the team along with Youngjae Lee with 2 shots in their prior match, and he created 2 chances as well. He does have a history of taking corners for some prior teams, so there is a little potential bolstering of his floor from that if he does contribute on set pieces. All right, moving on to their opponent, Sangmu, or Sangju, however you want to say it. Like I said, I'm not necessarily targeting anybody from this team, but they do have a lot of very cheap options, so I think this could be a good spot to pay down, get some salary savings so you can pay up elsewhere, because there are a lot of expensive set piece takers in the other matches here, or on the other side of this match as well. So the first guy I'm interested in, you're actually not going to see on here because he didn't start, but his name is Park Se Jin. He's only 2,800. He's listed as a defender, but he subbed on in the second half last week for Sangmu into the midfield on the left side. And he put up 5 crosses and took a direct free kick. And that was all in less than a half of action. So for 2,800, if he draws a start, that would be an incredible value. And somebody I would probably have a ton of exposure to. So definitely someone to watch for in the starting lineup there. Another guy to look at from the defender position here is the right back, Bae Jae-woo. He's only 3,800. He does like to attack and get forward. He put up over 10 DraftKings floor points last week. When I say floor points, that's any points other than goals or assists. So he had a really nice floor for his price. Not the greatest matchup, but if you want to pay down for a defender, he's a viable option. Finally, I think the center forward here, Jin Sung-uk, is actually in consideration at only 3,900. Of course, we're not typically going to want a central forward from an underdog. That's typically a hard avoid, but he's only 3,900, and he led the team in shots with 2, chances created 2. And he also drew 3 fouls, so that's a really nice floor for a $3,900 forward, especially if he's able to sneak in a goal. Then you're looking at 3 or 4x value potentially out of him. Actually, maybe like 5x. So really good spot there for some potential floor and upside for a very cheap price at the forward position. All right. Moving on to the Daegu and Pohang match. Let's start with Daegu here. They drew 1-1 in their first match. They tied for the most corners won, or the second most corners won of any team with 7. So that bodes well for their set piece chances. The first player I'm going to be looking at for them is their set piece taker, Silva Dos Santos, who on DraftKings is listed as Cecina. He is a Brazilian player. He's 11,500, which may be the most expensive player in the slate. However, again, set piece taker. He put up 12 crosses last week, which led all players in the K-League, and he had 17 DraftKings floor points, which is a very strong showing. So if you go back and look at his game logs, he's kind of got like Kevin De Bruyne-esque game logs, that mold of player, very reliable, but also possesses upside. So he's a definite player to think about targeting on this slate. The second player I want to mention from Daegu is another central forward player, Damjanovic. You're going to see that he was not a starter. He subbed on. He's only 3,900, but he has implied scoring odds of 31%. Again, no guarantee that he does start. However, if you do see him in the starting lineup, that's a great value for the money there in terms of upside, that is. All right, moving on to their opponent, Pohang. The man for Pohang is Palasevich here, the central attacking midfielder. He's 8,600 on this slate, which is a nice discount off Cecilia. However, he also takes the corners for his team and penalties. He scored one last week, and he also was able to put up 17 DraftKings floor points last slate, so a very strong showing, and arguably a stronger play than Cecilia here, just because of the price discount. The other player I'll mention from Pohang is Young Kim. He is the left back. He had 4 crosses and 4 chances created in their last match. So he does like to get forward and attack, which is exactly what we want to see out of a fullback under the DraftKings scoring system. All right. Final match of the slate. Let's start with Jeonbuk. For me, first of all, there's about 7 or 8 guys that I think are viable plays from this team, given that they are the most highly favored team and should have the best offensive output here. Last week, they had a 1-0 win. They also allowed the fewest peripheral points to their opponents. And again, peripheral points are like floor points I mentioned earlier. It's everything except goals and assists. So they're a very tough defense to play against given their quality, so I don't expect a lot out of Busan here. All right, as far as plays for Jeonbuk, there's a bunch of them. I'll just mention a couple that are kind of the ones I'm looking at first. And the first guy is Kim Bo-kun. He was last season's K-League MVP, 13 goals, 9 assists. So, and he also takes right-sided corners for them. So he's a really nice combination of floor and upside, which is kind of the perfect mold for DraftKings. I think he's really mispriced at 6,500. He'll probably be one of the first guys into some of my lineups. The next guy I'm looking at is Murillo. That's him here, Pereira Rocha. All these guys have like 3 or 4 names, makes it very confusing. And actually on that note, make sure you're very careful about who you're putting in your lineup on DraftKings versus what their name shows at in the lineup, because it could be different. I don't know how it works. Sometimes these guys' last names are really their first name, but you don't know what's on the jersey. Anyways, just be careful with that. But Pereira Rocha here, a.k.a. Murillo. This guy's 4,700. Now, he was subbed off early in the second half at 61 minutes, and we never want to target guys who are subject to an early substitution, but he's an exception. 4,700, very cheap. In the 61 minutes he played last week, he took all the left-sided corners. He created 5 chances, which led the team, and he put up 11 DraftKings floor points. So in this matchup at that price, even if we only get 60 minutes out of him, that actually could be more than enough. And the upside here is that he doesn't get hooked early and he plays a full game, and then he could easily be the best value on this slate. So I'm willing to take that risk and certainly play him here. All right, finally, Busan. I'm not really targeting anybody from this team. Pacheco Dasilva, his name is Romulo, another Brazilian. He's like their kind of all-around set-piece taker, corner taker. He's got the best floor in the team, but he's priced up at 7,400. I just don't think it's optimal to spend that kind of salary on the biggest underdog of the slate. Of course, he does have a very high floor. He's a safe play, but I think you're neglecting upside if you pay for him. One guy I would have more interest in is the right winger here, Lee Dong Joon, 4,900. He's kind of a young up-and-coming talent. He did a little bit of everything last week. He was drawing fouls, sending in crosses, winning some tackles. So that's a nice sustainable floor for a forward. The other thing about Busan is they're kind of like, if you're familiar with the EPL, they're like Aston Villa. They have a couple players who have talent. They like to attack and get forward, but they're just like, screw it, burn the bridges, and we're not going to play defense. So that's kind of how Busan's style has been known to be. So this could be a pretty open match, and maybe it's like a 3-1, 4-1 match where Busan does pull out a goal. So Lee Dong-jung is kind of a guy to look at to maybe throw in a GPP, but I don't think I'm touching anyone from Busan in cash. All right, that wraps up kind of the breakdown of each match and the player targets. Just a couple other notes if you are still watching. I wanted to point out a couple of research resources for K-League. The first is K-League United. They've got really good in-depth previews of each team and each match from specific reporters that cover each team. They do have predicted lineups for some of the matches, which is super nice also. And then if you're just looking for data, SofaScore is going to be your best resource for this league. You can actually get pretty detailed here and sort a bunch of stats. For example, shots from set piece, which helps you identify the set piece takers from each team. And then the even better thing is that if you click on specific players, you can pull up their heat maps. Unfortunately, there's no heat maps for K-League, but if they've played anywhere else, you're going to get a heat map like this. And the cool thing about a heat map is it just shows where they are in the pitch, where they spend most of their time. So for Palisevich here from Pohang, you see he's got a lot of red right in the corners. That's because he's a corner taker. So it helps you pick out little things like that.